Career prosecutors are in open revolt tonight, and it's not hard to see why. A federal grand jury just indicted James Comey for allegedly lying to Congress, an indictment driven by a Trump-allied lawyer who once filed a RICO suit against the Muppets. Yes, those Muppets. Inside Main Justice, staffers are calling it the revenge packet, and they're flat-out refusing to touch it. If you've always believed the Department of Justice should stand above the political fray, prepare yourself, because right now, that building is splitting right down the middle, and the cracks are showing. The indictment, fast. Here's the skinny. Late yesterday, a D.C. grand jury returned a 3-count indictment claiming Comey misled lawmakers about FISA leaks back in 2018. The charges rest on a single line in a 200-page transcript where Comey says, "I did not authorize disclosure." Prosecutors allege he did. Penalty? Up to 5 years per count. But here's the kicker. The case was farmed out to Lindsay Halligan, a Florida litigator best known for suing New York, AG Letitia James, for harassing Trump. She used an obscure, rarely tapped rule that lets private citizens present evidence if a judge signs off. One magistrate did, and boom, this indictment just dropped like a grenade in the Great Hall. The revolt. Within minutes of the unsealing, the DOJ Slack absolutely lit up. One career prosecutor didn't mince words, writing, "This is Beria-level stuff," referencing Stalin's notorious henchmen. Another replied with a vomiting emoji. "Speaks volumes, doesn't it?" Sources in the National Security Division tell me at least 5 line attorneys have already asked for recusals. One supervisor flat-out refused to sign the charging memo, forcing Halligan to shop the paperwork to a U.S. attorney's office in another state. I've covered the DOJ for a decade, and I've never seen an internal revolt this public, this raw. Usually, folks leak to the press. This time, they're practically screaming inside the building. The evidence problem. Now, let's talk facts. The indictment leans heavily on a 2018 email chain where Comey tells aides, "Please keep media outreach tight." Halligan claims that proves he controlled leaks. Trouble is, the full email thread, already released under FOIA, shows Comey was talking about protecting sensitive grand jury material, not authorizing disclosures. Career prosecutors flagged that critical gap last week in a memo labeled Fatal Variance, meaning the proof simply doesn't match the charge. Translation: the case is tissue paper thin, utterly flimsy, and they know it. The stakes. Why should you care about this? Because if a private citizen with overt partisan credentials can force the indictment of a former FBI director, what precedent does that set? Every future investigative target could potentially try to return the favor. That's why the head of the DOJ's criminal division called an emergency meeting this morning. Staffers left the room convinced the indictment will collapse, but the damage is already done. The world now sees the Justice Department as a political chew toy, tossed around at will. If you want to keep following the nuts and bolts of this story, documents, timelines, the works, then do yourself a favor. Hit subscribe and ring that bell. I drop nightly breakdowns while the cable guys are still finding their graphics. What happens next? Look for 3 flashpoints. First, Comey's team will file a motion to dismiss under the speech or debate clause, arguing Congress already vetted his testimony. Second, expect a slew of whistleblower letters. One prosecutor told me off camera he's ready to testify that pressure came from outside the building. Third, if a judge tosses the case, watch for Trump to weaponize the dismissal on the campaign trail. claiming deep state judges protect their own. Either way, the DOJ's already battered reputation takes another brutal body blow. Tonight, the Justice Department faces a stark choice: protect its institutional credibility or let partisan prosecutions become the new, terrifying normal. Career lawyers have drawn their line in the carpeted hallway. If leadership backs Halligan's deeply flawed play, don't be surprised when the next administration retaliates, and the destructive cycle never ends. The rule of law isn't a pendulum. It's the foundational bedrock of our system. Once you crack it, the whole house tilts.